Welcome to Fumblegate Podcast on YouTube. I'm Jason Griefer. We're joined by the Fumblegate fatty himself, Adam Kieft. And in this episode, we're talking all about the 2020 NFL Draft, which is coming up later today, as a matter of fact. We're uploading this here early on draft day on YouTube, and so you can follow along with us and see how awesomely accurate we are with our picks as we are every year. You can go back and watch our previous episodes. We don't ever get a pick wrong, do we?
No, I will guarantee right now, I will guarantee that Fumblegate has the number one pick correctly picked. And oh, by the way, this isn't just for fun. You go back and watch the previous episodes. We at Fumblegate have picked the number one pick for months now. This is not new. I know that some of you may say, well, oh, it's obvious now. But if you go back to the national championship game, we have let you know all along who the number one pick in the NFL draft was going to be. Us knowing the Cincinnati area, us knowing how Mike Brown's mind works, us knowing what the number one pick entails. We have told you all along what the number one pick was going to be. And today, I will guarantee that we at Fumblegate know the number one pick in today/tomorrow's NFL draft. We know, the all-knowing Fumblegate will guarantee.
You want to spoil it?
Well, are we into the picks yet?
No, I mean, we like we said, it's obvious. So
okay, we will guarantee here at Fumblegate. We will guarantee, and again, go check the tape because we guaranteed you this a long time ago that the number one pick in today, tomorrow, whatever day we air this, the NFL draft of 2020 is none other than Athens, Ohio's LSU's own Joe Burrow. The number one pick in the 2020 NFL draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select LSU's Joseph Burrow.
Go back and watch, folks. We don't lie.
We've guaranteed it. We have never swayed away from the fact that Joe Burrow would be the number one pick.
No, absolutely not. Okay,
but
so
we have a lot of other picks that aren't predetermined.
Yeah,
we're here at Fumblegate, and tomorrow when you watch the draft, you're like, "Damn, those guys were pretty smart."
Yeah. We're gonna talk We're gonna give you a mock top 10 here. We're gonna tell you, who should move up, who should move down. Will there be any stunners? We talked in our video talking about Rob Gronkowski joining Tampa Bay. You thought we were going to see a lot of moves in this upcoming draft, but let's go right at the top. The report is out that ahead of draft time, the Bengals have relayed to Joe Burrow that he will be the number one pick. They're still going to give him the moment where they call him and say, "Hey, congratulations, you're a Bengal," yada yada yada. Because
they should.
Well, it looks good for TV. Yeah, I'm with it.
Yeah. And even if everybody didn't know, I think the moment, and again, it's going to be different. Obviously, here we are in 2020 with the social distancing rules, and obviously the different things that have happened with the coronavirus, and obviously what we're dealing with as a country, and obviously as a world here. The draft has changed, and we talked about this months ago, that the NFL and what they were going to do in Las Vegas with the stage being in the middle of the fountain, like the pomp and circumstance that was going to surround this NFL draft was pretty awesome. Unfortunately, because of the situation that we're dealing with, it is not going to be the same for some of those kids. But, at the end of the day, I don't know that it changes for a guy like Joe Burrow. I think he's a old school, I don't care kind of guy. He just wants to put his head down and get to work. I don't think that he cares about all the pomp and circumstance. But the fact that the NFL and the Bengals are going to give him the opportunity to kind of have that moment of the phone call and the film. He's going to be at home in Athens, Ohio, 2.5 hours away from the Bengals stadium.
Which, by the way, does not make him a local. He's not a local to Cincinnati.
I'm not saying he's a local.
No, I know that you know that, but there are so many people out there that, he's from Ohio. It's a natural fit. That's the same damn thing as like when Derek Dietrich was with the Reds, and it's like, he's a native Buckeye. He's from Cleveland.
Yeah,
not the same.
No, I get it. He's not a Cincinnati kid. He's not.
No, he said he hates Skyline.
Yeah, he doesn't like Skyline. Which for all those you don't know who don't live here in Cincinnati,
that's strike one.
Kind of sacrilege here in Cincinnati, like not liking Skyline. Me personally, I love Skyline. My wife, not a big fan, but my wife grew up in Southern California, so it's a little bit different. But
perfect.
The Bengals were the team he grew up cheering for, and I love the story of that. The people who claim he's a local, clearly not a local. He did not grow up within for those of you in the area, within the loop. He did not grow up within the loop. He's
geography
area. But, he grew up cheering for the Bengals, and I do love that story. I think it's awesome. There was an interview with Carson Palmer earlier this week about, whether or not he would want to play here. You love to see a kid who gets the chance to compete for the team that he grew up cheering for. And it's not often you see it. And that's why I think that adds a little bit of the legacy to this pick. Just because, who would have known it ended up here? The Bengals were one game away from picking number 2.
Yeah, they tried to come back and blow it against Miami.
They had every opportunity to pick anywhere between 1 and 4, but you know what? Darn it, the Bengals will not be denied to get that number 1 pick. It's going to be interesting to see. And again, obviously, the NFL and the Bengals agree with our pick that we made months ago, that Joe Burrow is going to be the number 1 pick. Definitely, unfortunately, he's set up for failure. Being the number 1 pick, you're always set up for failure. But again, we talked about it on a previous episode where when you're in Cincinnati, what's the expectation? You're not expected to come in and win a Super Bowl. We're not talking about Tampa Bay. We're not talking about not even Tampa Bay. We're not talking about New England. We're not talking about the 49ers. We're not talking about the Steelers. We're not talking about any of those teams with a legacy of winning Super Bowls. Here in Cincinnati, we just want you to be 8-8. That's what we do. Like 8-8, and if you make the playoffs every third year, that's what we're happy with. So, I wish the best for Joe Burrow. I hope that he can bring the Bengals back to relevance and success. Again, it's a great story, a team that he grew up rooting for, but at the end of the day, well-deserved. Obviously, we've talked about it on the show before, probably the most successful college quarterback season that we've seen. And again, I think he's in a position to be successful. He can make throws that I have not seen other kids make. He can make throws in college that NFL quarterbacks can't make. He is in position to be successful. And we've talked about this in the past. The Bengals went out and made moves. Like, if we're going to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals and their history when it comes to free agency and to working towards the next season, the Cincinnati Bengals went out and made moves this offseason. So if ever there was an opportunity for a guy to come in as the number 1 pick in Joe Burrow and be successful, the Cincinnati Bengals have certainly put it on the table. Now, we know that the ownership isn't great, and we know that they have an opportunity to screw this up, which they always seem to do. But if ever there was a number 1 pick coming into a good situation with a team who typically does not put their players into a situation to succeed, Joe Burrow is coming into that situation here in Cincinnati.
Well, the thing is, too, you look at, yes, you don't get to 2-14 without being awful last year. But you talked about the moves they made, signing DJ Reader, Trey Waynes. Those it could be 2 nice pieces. I think the combination of DJ Reader and Geno Atkins is going to be an absolute monster. They right now, you talk about those 2 guys with Carlos Dunlap, Sam Hubbard, and Carl Lawson. You have one of the best defensive lines in football. Now, you need to get a linebacker, and you brought in the guy from Baltimore. That helps. And you need
by the way, they're still picking at number 33, and we're going to talk about our top 10 here in a second. Yeah. And I don't know if either of us have a linebacker in the top 10. There's going to be very good linebackers available at 33. And
the thing with
the Bengals, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Well, on the other side of the ball too, Burrow's not walking into an empty cupboard offensively either. Yeah. You got Mixon, you got Gio Bernard. We think AJ Green's going to play.
He's got to sign the tender, and we talked about that on previous episodes. AJ Green has to be an integral part in this offense. And I think at this point, I think that's a foregone conclusion. I don't think that anyone's beating down the door with some first-round picks for AJ Green.
No.
Because he's been injured. Certainly a first-round trade talent, but because he's been injured, it's going to be hard to deal him, particularly before the draft here. We're talking about the next 12 to 18 hours. It's going to be hard to deal a guy with his injury history. But certainly, like you mentioned, the pieces are on the table. He's going to have weapons around him. Mm-hmm. Again, it's going to be yet to be seen whether or not they're going to protect him. And again, the defensive line and the defensive secondary looks really good. But as we all know in the NFL, linebackers are a big part of the NFL, and covering guys out of the backfield and making tackles in short yardage situations. That's one thing the Bengals are lacking right now. We're going to have to see how they address it in the draft. We know that they're getting their franchise quarterback or who we would assume would be the franchise quarterback at number 1. But I think that pick at 33 really becomes of utmost importance. Particularly the Bengals have some draft picks in later rounds. If they can get back into the first round to get a gap stop linebacker for the middle of their defense, that's going to be a really big indication of what they're going to do on defense.
They're either going to go at 33. They're going to go linebacker if one of those guys is available, or they're going to take the best offensive tackle available, which might be the guy from the kid from USC, because you can have all the weapons around you, but if you don't have anybody up front, it can get ugly. And you're going to have Jonah Williams now with the team. Will you put him at left?
We assume fully healthy Jonah Williams, which
so you got one tackle there. Up
until the point he got injured, looked pretty good.
You got one tackle there. Maybe you can, and if you bring in another guy, and you can put him at the other tackle spot, you can get rid of Bobby Hart's awesome contract. But anyway, let's kind of throw all that aside, and let's go into an alternate universe, because like you said, you played for Mike Brown. You know how that franchise works. Talk to me about what would the reaction be in an alternate universe if the Bengals traded the number 1 pick, not pick somebody else other than Joe Burrow, but traded out of number 1. What would the reaction be in Cincinnati?
We talked about this on the show previously, and it's been months, obviously, with the coronavirus and both of us having young children and obviously having other careers. It makes it difficult for us to do this all the time, but we talked about this before. We've said all along that Mike Brown was not trading this pick, and the Cincinnati Bengals were not going to trade this number 1 pick. But I will say social media and otherwise has definitely put this up for debate, and that's what makes this kind of fun. Because there has been options, so to say, thrown out there on social media, including Miami trading in their entire draft this season to get up to number 1. Picking Kelly at number 4, coming up to number 5, coming up to number 1 by trading their entire draft, which includes 3 first-rounders this year, 2 second-round draft picks, and 2 first-round draft picks next year.
Nope.
It would certainly be interesting to see something like that happen. But, again, like we mentioned, Mike Brown is not trading this pick away. That's not what he does. He does not make moves like this.
No, I know he's not trading it, but what would the reaction be in Cincinnati if he did?
It's funny because I would love to say that people would love it, particularly with what he could get in return. But the backlash from the fan base would be irate. People would go nuts if he traded away this pick. And to me, that's crazy because you could have got a king's ransom for this pick. Certainly the offers were out there, and who knows what the actual offers could have been. But the rumors of up to 2 first-round picks this year, 2 second-round picks this year, and 2 the first and second next year, getting 6 picks for the number 1 pick, like that is insane, and that's something that I think you would have to consider. Yeah. But being a Bengals fan and knowing their history in the draft, and we know the Bengals have had good drafts of late, and they've had good picks, and you see what they've done and what they've built with what their draft picks have been. Obviously, excluding the 5th-round pick in 2005, they have had very good drafts of late.
Whatever happened to that?
It's interesting to see what they could have done with what they could have got for the number 1 pick. But again, we've mentioned here on Fumblegate, that pick was never getting traded. That was always going to be Joe Burrow. We've said that back since January. But it would have been interesting to see Mike Brown entertain that. But fans here in Cincinnati would have hated if that pick got traded.
Does this feel like now with the situation where, Joe Burrow is going to be the next Bengals quarterback, presumably for the next 15 years, and all the moves that they've made defensively to try to upgrade on the defensive side of the ball because they were so bad a year ago? Does this feel like this is Zach Taylor is truly his first year that at the helm of the program, and he's not just trying to inherit Marvin Lewis's retreads?
It kind of does, and you know what? It's similar to the situation that we've seen. We saw a couple times here in Cincinnati with Marvin Lewis, where you didn't feel like he had complete control for a few of those seasons. Obviously, Marvin Lewis was here for a long time, but there was definitely seasons where you didn't feel like Marvin Lewis had complete control of his roster.
Okay, did you feel that way when you played for him? That he was looking over his shoulder, knowing that Mike Brown was sitting there waiting on his golf cart?
Yeah, I think so, and I think other fans would agree with that. And if you look at the history and the other players who have come out talking about that era, with a guy like Chad Johnson, a guy like T.J. Houshmandzadeh, Carson Palmer.
Hell, he's been on every radio show you could think of for the last 2 months.
Right, and I think that there's always been the feeling that at certain times during his tenure, Marvin Lewis did not control his roster, and unfortunately, we know in Cincinnati that that's probably the case because Mike Brown likes to control a large portion of his franchise, and we see it in the reduced amount of staff that he employs, the scouting staff, the people that he includes in the decisions that he makes on the roster. It is a bubble, and it's
the lack of practice bubble.
Because, like you mentioned, is this kind of like Zach Brown's first year? It is a little bit, because you have the feeling here in Cincinnati that he didn't have control of that entire roster. And he was put behind the 8 ball. They didn't have a great roster coming in, regardless of who the starting quarterback was, regardless of who the other players were. They weren't in a great spot. And we know the Bengals didn't spend great in free agency last year. We know that their draft wasn't phenomenal. Now, they had a good draft. It wasn't phenomenal for Zach Taylor's first draft. I think this is a draft that they cannot screw up. As it looks right now, they are not going to. Joe Burrow at number 1. It's yet to be seen what they do with their number 2 pick. If they come back in, like you mentioned, they come back in and get an offensive tackle to protect their franchise quarterback. They come back in to get the quarterback of their defense and get a middle linebacker to see what's available. I don't have a linebacker in my top 10, which means linebackers are going to be bumped down a little bit. I have offensive tackles at a premium, which is going to put the Bengals at a disadvantage when it comes to finding those. So it's going to be interesting. But like you mentioned, again, back to the original question, does it feel like Zach Taylor's first year as a coach? It does kind of, because, again, like we mentioned with Marvin Lewis, there is a handicap and a handcuff passed down because of the ownership. And that's why we've mentioned in the past why it's hard to fill that job as a head coach, because certain coaches don't want to work under a owner who is not going to give them free rein to do what they want to do. And certain coaches aren't going to be able to implement systems and bring in the players they want to bring in. This kind of feels like Zach Taylor now has a little bit more of the reins to steer this franchise in the direction that puts them back into the position he was in with the Rams in his previous job, and kind of having a little bit more of a say in what the product on the field is going to be.
Now they need to change uniforms.
100% agree.
I'll just say the uniforms. You really want to usher in a new era? It's a new day, as that was the slogan all of last season. It's time to get new uniforms. I'm not saying the helmet's got to change, although I'd love to see the NFL finally pass a rule where teams can wear multiple helmets during the season instead of just taking the stickers off. That would be awesome. Do it.
Single helmet deal kind of handcuffs them.
But yeah, the uniforms got to change. Got to usher in a new era.
We talked about this in the group chat. You look at, we already mentioned on our previous episode, you look at what the LA Chargers have done with their uniforms and the combinations they're going to have this year. Phenomenal. The Browns, who have one of the most simplistic but yet great uniforms.
They went old school.
They went old school and they added the stripes back to the helmet. They look phenomenal. Atlanta, I don't love their change, but as a fan base, if you're looking for something new and something exciting, I see where that is an intriguing concept for the Falcons. The Bengals just don't change.
How about that? How about that awful Rams logo?
Well, you know what? I don't love the LA Chargers LA logo. I think the LA Chargers LA logo sucks. Now, luckily, they're leaving their helmets the same. They're sticking with the bolt on the helmets.
Numbers.
Their LA logo sucks. The Rams new logo, their LA logo sucks. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's changed and it's something to get people talking and keep people interested. And that's one thing that the Bengals just don't do.
Well, and it's the thing. It's been
changing up.
It's been 16 years since the Bengals went away from the block style uniforms. It was there through Marvin's first year, 2004. His second year is when the change came to what you have now. And now that Nike's involved, Nike's always, they want to put their foot into everything. And now they've changed so far. I think 8 of the teams in the league, so 1/4 of the league has new uniforms going into next season. New England tinkered with theirs a little. Although I don't pay much attention to them since they didn't go back to the old school helmet with the dude down in the 3-point stance.
In the 3-point stance with the ball.
Yeah. So they just kind of just made their color rush stuff more prominent. So,
but again, it's a change and it's something different. It's something just to look at it and say, hey, it's new, it's fresh.
Yeah.
Even if you're not changing much, but we know that's what the Bengals do, and that's what Mike Brown does. They don't like to change. You would like to see it, and we've tossed around different ideas between the two of us. Just changing the color scheme. Let's go with a white helmet with black stripes. Let's go with a black helmet with orange stripes. Like, let's just change it up. But it's one of those things that, one, that's an investment. It costs money to do, which we know Mike Brown is not willing to do. And just kind of
kick it. Troy are.
But again, when you don't have much of a tradition, is it really kicking it old school, or is it just kind of like sticking with what you know because you don't know any better?
For me, give me a hybrid of the original uniforms from the '60s and the uniforms from the '90s. Give me some kind of hybrid.
There is certainly a window to improve the uniforms for the Bengals, and it's just as of
that's the other thing. You're saying that Joe Burrow's our guy for the next 10 to 15 years. And he's going to be the face of the franchise. Well, wouldn't you want to freshen up the look that the face of the franchise is going to have?
Where's the new day, right? Like, if you want to change the face of the franchise, let's do it, top to bottom. Let's come in, let's flip the script, and let's go. As history has shown us, like, Mike Brown is not willing to do that. So, are we surprised here in Cincinnati? No.
Bring back the original Tiger logo too. Get rid of that B.
Yeah,
that B is boring.
I don't like the B. Just the stripes. I'm okay. Do the LSU style. Just do the stripes. Like, I'm okay with it. Like, put the ends on with just stripes. It's okay.
Those white LSU helmets are the cleanest in college sports.
Oh, all right. They're so nasty.
Yeah. Let's move on here and let's continue our draft talk now. And as we will give you our top 10 mock draft that's coming up here in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about some moves. The top 10 that we're going to give you will not include any trades at all. We're just going to go 1 through 10 in our mock draft. And I know you're chomping at the bit to get in here, but for the purpose of a mock draft, because you can't always predict trades, there are some obvious moves that could be made.
We did predict some good ones last year. Right?
We did.
You go back and watch the tape from 2019,
we did
good trades.
You hit it right on the head with Daniel Jones and the Giants getting him there at 6. And a couple other trades too that took place there. You were right on it. But all right, so before we get to the mock draft, give me a team or two that you think should move up and or should move down.
It's interesting because I hate to come back to it. I think Cincinnati has to come back into the first round, and it's going to be interesting to see how the first round plays out. But we've mentioned it before. They have to either, A, protect their franchise quarterback in Joe Burrow, or they have to find a quarterback for that defense. I think the Bengals have to work their way back in. And they have picks in the lower rounds to do that. I think they have to come back in, even if it's the mid-20s. I think they have to come back in. because there's going to be linebackers and offensive tackles available in the mid-20s that are going to be projected long-term NFL starters. I think that's something they have to do. And then the one I want to see going back, I want to see the Lions drop down. I know they're at number 3 right now. I want to see the Lions drop back, and we're going to talk about here when we get to the top 10. Maybe it's me being a slight homer, being from Michigan. I want to see the Lions go back, and I want to see them try to build something around Matt Stafford, because I think Matt Stafford is a very good NFL quarterback, and we've talked about this in the past. There are much worse quarterbacks in the NFL than Matt Stafford that teams are building franchises around, and the Lions have not seemed to do it. It's funny because there's
not
a lot of
Megatron retired.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between where we live now in Cincinnati and where I grew up for my formative years in Michigan, and being a Lions fan by default. Now, I was never a Lions fan, but having that be the forefront.
Who else is there?
Well, again, being the forefront of seeing the Lions over and over. Yeah. They have a franchise quarterback, and they paid him a bunch of money. He's getting paid. It's going to be interesting to see if the Lions can build something around him. And similar to what we deal with here in Cincinnati with Mike Brown, the Ford family and Martha Ford do not invest money in their football team because that is not their primary moneymaker. Martha Ford does not care as much about that team as she should, and it will be interesting to see, because of the seat they sit in, because they have the opportunity to pick whomever they want at number 3, if they can trade back and start to put some picks and some players around a franchise quarterback like they have in Matt Stafford.
I would love to see the New York Giants move back. They're sitting at 4 right now, and the reason why I say it is they got to go offensive tackle. You got to get you've got Daniel Jones, you've got Saquon Barkley, you got to get somebody to start fortifying an offensive line that, quite frankly, was very porous last year. You got to start shoring it up, and we've talked about this. There is a loaded class at the top for offensive tackles. It is so top heavy, this class. Tristan Wirfs, Jedrick Wills, Mekhi Becton, and there's even options further down. Josh Jones from Houston that's going to be available. I would love to see the Giants move back, maybe towards the back end of the top 10. I don't necessarily say you want to drop back to the teens, because when you're a team in the Giants that had the season they did a year ago at 4-12, you need a stud. You got to get somebody, but because there are so many pieces available at offensive tackle that and there's not really one, I think, for me anyway, and you could speak to this more, being an offensive tackle yourself. There is not, in my eye, one that really stands out head and shoulders above the rest. Now, most people, I think, would probably say Tristan Wirfs would be number 1, but some people may think Jedrick Wills is number 1. Some people like Mekhi Becton, so on and so forth. I know we were talking before we came on here that your former coach, Paul Alexander, loves Mekhi Becton and what he can bring. So that's what I would love to see the Giants move back, acquire more assets, and build that way through the draft, because right now New York's not exactly a beckoning place for free agency. No. Sure, you can make a few moves here and there, but that is not an attractive area to go to. I mean, the Jets aren't going out and signing any monstrous names in free agency. They're talking still about dumping Jamal Adams, which would be a stupid move to get rid of him, and you're basically starting over on defense there. But that's the one for me I would love to see move back in the draft, is the Detroit Lions. And you want to talk about a team that I would like to see maybe move up in the draft. The one for me that I would love to see happen, and I don't think it's going to happen, I would love to see the Tampa Bay Bucks do it. Forgo draft picks, give up your number 1 next year, give up a number 2 in 2022, go up into the top 5 and get yourself an offensive lineman to protect Tom Brady. Because to me, with Brady being 43 years old, wants to play to his 45, he's on a 2-year deal, so on and so forth, you got to win now. And if that means mortgaging the future to try to win a title now, I think you got to pull that trigger. Will it happen? Probably not. But that's one I would love to see Tampa go from 14 all the way up, maybe to number 4. Maybe you make a trade with the Giants and then the Giants can work from 14, maybe back up to 9 or 10 to get an offensive tackle. But that would be the one I would love to see. Just screw it, balls to the wall. We're going for it. Jump up 9 or 10 spots in the draft. Go get the offensive lineman that you've had your eye on the whole time, and give Brady even more reason to love his choice to go to Tampa, other than it's Florida, there's no state income tax, and he's renting from Derek Jeter.
No, I agree. I think that both of your choices are good. I think that the Giants, like you mentioned, they have to go out and get somebody to protect Daniel Jones, and they have to get somebody to go with Saquon Barkley. Their division, more than ever, seems up in the air. We know what Dallas is doing down there.
That division sucks.
That division sucks. Dak Prescott apparently is now a franchise quarterback. We all know that Ezekiel Elliott is the key, the cog that makes that offense run. They're going to pay Dak Prescott either a franchise tender, or they're going to pay him like a franchise quarterback, which we both agree is not a good decision. The only thing I hesitate on is, like you mentioned with Tampa Bay, I don't know if Tampa Bay has to jump up that high to go out and get an offensive lineman, because
I don't think they do either, because they're so deep. But I just love to see it. If they got a guy that, that would say
they're sold on it and they want to make the jump, that's the move. But
you'll see 14,
there's going to be a lot of guys there at 14.
You'll see the interviews, and you've seen the interviews in the past from coaches and general managers that have been bold-faced lies when they tell you, we had this guy at number 1 on our board all along. Even though most teams, I would say, outside of Cincinnati, would probably have Chase Young as the number 1 overall prospect on their board.
When you don't need a quarterback, I think that's absolutely the case.
Right, and they don't. The
number 1 team didn't need a quarterback, Chase Young is the number 1 prospect.
But you know that's going to be coming. That interview would come. Then if they trade up to 4 and say they took Tristan Wirfs, that the interview would come to say, well, we had him at the top of our board all along in this evaluation process, which is a bold-faced lie. Chase Young is the guy you had number 1 on the board. You just never thought you were going to get him.
No, I agree. And as long as we're on the topic, how much do you think this process that we're going through here with everything that we're dealing with, how much do you think that process is going to play into the draft on Thursday? How much do you think that not being able to have in-person workouts and not being able to have, pro days, how much do you think that process is going to play into this draft coming up here on Thursday?
In 10 years, you're going to look back at this draft and say there were some monstrous misses and there were some gold mine strikes that came, probably, teens, 20s, maybe even into the second round, because there's, everybody's just watching tape or, doing Zoom conference calls or getting Zoom video workouts sent to them. It's different than evaluating it in person. This as a former player and now a coach. It's different to see a guy on tape as it is to evaluate them in person. And so I think that's going to be the biggest thing. I think there's always going to be an asterisk next to this draft because teams have not had to go through the normal preparations and what they would normally do. And it's been all technology based. You can't meet with these guys one-on-one. You can't go to their pro days. Players can't even have pro days, so on and so forth. And so I think that's likely why you're going to see potentially a lot of trades outside of the top 2 picks. I think everybody from 3 on down is open for business. And so I think that's going to be the big thing 10 years from now is there's going to be some guys that are going to be, oh my God, how did he slip to 24 in the draft? Well, maybe this is a good example of why he slips to 24 in the draft. For example, is because nobody could get a proper evaluation on him. I mean, a guy like Jordan Love, who we all think is probably going to be the 4th quarterback off the board, the kid from Utah State. Yep. Somebody could get him in the teens, maybe the 20s, and all of a sudden, he's a guy. Maybe he winds up in New England and becomes the next franchise guy in New England. And you wonder, how the hell did he slide that far? Teams couldn't get proper evaluations in. And I think that's going to be the story, I think, 10 years from now, is everybody's going to look back and say, how was that such a wild draft? Well, we were in wild times, and teams could not do what they normally do.
I agree. I actually think there's going to be a few more hits than misses in this draft because being forced to watch film. This is one of the drafts that you're going to avoid workout warriors because you're very limited on what you're going to see in the workout form.
I can see that, yeah.
You're going to avoid, a player who comes in and runs a phenomenal 40, but his film doesn't match up with his speed. And we've seen it in the past, and we've seen, teams like the Raiders with Darius Hayward-Bay, and he runs a phenomenal 40, and he comes out and
the sixth pick
sucks,
Yeah.
Like the Lions and what they've done with their receivers in the past, and we're going back, 15, 16 years, but I think you're going to see less of that, where a guy is getting picked based on combine numbers or workout numbers. I think that's why this will be a little more interesting. I think you're going to see a few more hits than misses out of this draft. But like you mentioned, a guy like Jordan Love, who's going to be probably the number 4 quarterback, and I hate to make the comparison, but is potential to be a Patrick Mahomes-style quarterback, where everybody kind of didn't know and they weren't sure, and his film looked okay.
He's got the tools.
But a team who's sold on what he does.
Yeah.
And a team who loves what Jordan Love can do.
Yeah.
Like what the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes. They loved what Patrick Mahomes could do, and they were willing to sell their soul to make their franchise around that guy. I think that's something that you're going to see out of this draft, is you're going to see a team, and maybe it's only one team, but somebody is going to go out.
That's all it takes.
And put their draft on one guy who everybody kind of slept on and said, you know what, maybe he's another 10 picks later, and they're going to make the deal to either pick where they're at or they're going to move up to get him, and that's going to make a difference in their franchise for years to come. Again, you go back, and I hate to do it, but you look at the Kansas City pick, and you were like, he's a mediocre quarterback at Texas Tech.
Well, then you also they already had Alex Smith.
Yep.
And
you had Alex Smith, and you paid him a bunch of money. He's a franchise quarterback.
Right.
Is that really the pick? But Kansas City was sold on Patrick Mahomes, and they knew what they wanted to accomplish with him as their quarterback, and now they're Super Bowl champions. And I think that's something that probably will come out of this draft, is we're probably going to see a team who is sold on somebody who got overlooked because he didn't work out great, but a team did their research and they looked at his film and said, you know what, that's our guy, and we're going to design what we're going to do around that guy. And it could be offense, it could be defense. I don't know where that person's going to fall, but I feel like this is a draft where somebody is going to get overlooked, which happens in every draft. But somebody is going to get overlooked that's going to get picked in a spot that people don't expect, and that's going to make a difference in that franchise.
Yeah, I think it's along with what I was talking about before, that you're going to see somebody later, maybe in the first round, maybe in the second round, that was just, oh my God. And but the perception going in is, we had to see these, how did he get that far down? Well, he didn't do this right. He didn't do that right, so on and so forth. And so, we'll see that. I think it's just maybe even more to the extreme, because the in-person, the eye can oftentimes tell more than the film will.
It's going to be interesting, because I think that, again, there's probably going to be on both sides. There's probably going to be guys that are picked way too high. But, again, there's probably going to be guys that teams are sold on that are going to be picked in the right spot. And at the time, you're going to think that's a crazy pick, but it's going to work out. And it may come down to franchises that do that in every draft.
Yeah.
It may come down to, that's what the Raiders do. They pick guys too high.
Yeah.
And they come back to, New England finds the guy in the second round who's their franchise quarterback for the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It may come down to that. And it's really going to be how scouting departments work and how teams work it out. And we talked about this in our chat beforehand. Like, it kind of puts everybody on a level playing field, and it works better for teams who have done their scouting in the past the way that it's going to work now. Teams with smaller scouting departments, i.e. the Bengals, they benefit from a draft like this because they're not dealing with individual workouts and pro days, because they can't send everybody to everywhere. They're just going to go with the guys they're sold on. It may benefit teams like the Bengals and say, hey, that's our guy, and we loved his film, and that's who we're going to go with. And it's going to be interesting. I really think that maybe it's only one team, but I really think there's going to be a team who picks a guy where people don't think he should, and that's going to be a franchise difference maker for the next 5 years.
Well, it also helps too with the Bengals in that respect that they coached the Senior Bowl this year, so they
Yeah.
got an up close look. And how many times did we see that in the Marvin Lewis era? When they coached the Senior Bowl, they often tended to be right on the head with a lot of their draft picks, and when they didn't, it was a little bit more hit or miss. So, that could play into the Bengals' favor. Who knows what direction they go with that regard. And talking about, we talked about Jordan Love. Where will he go? Could he be the guy that, has the raw tools, but maybe becomes the next Patrick Mahomes? We don't know. We'll wait and see on that. But the guy that obviously everyone has the biggest question mark around, obviously, is Tua Tagovailoa. No one knows what we're getting from him. The reports are he's been cleared, fully healthy. He's, sent workout videos to a bunch of teams. He held his own sort of pro day a while back, not too long ago, and from the tape looks great. But again, that workout is different than what you saw in the game film, and obviously all the injuries he's had with the hip, both ankles, and so on and so forth. There's been talk the last 24 to 36 hours, and maybe it's just smoke and mirrors, and it may end up being that way, that Miami has been considered going up from 5 to 3 to get an offensive tackle and not selecting Tua Tagovailoa. Now, Miami still has another first-round pick. I believe it's at 18. Is it possible that Tua slides all the way to 18, given that no one knows right now and there's so much uncertainty around his medicals?
I don't know if he makes it to 18. And we're going to talk about it here in a second when we get to our top 10.
Yeah.
I don't know if he makes it to 18.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. And again, we just talked about it. Does the evaluation process change where these guys would end up? Because Tua did not get a chance to have a pro day of sorts. If Tua has his pro day at Alabama, and again, there's plenty of other prospects that are coming out of Alabama. By all means, everyone is showing up. But if Tua has a pro day, every head coach in the NFL is showing up for that pro day. And because you cannot have that, it changes how you scout a player like Tua. Now, you only get to watch his film. And I know he sent out his pro day style film and the throws he wants to make. But the eye test of seeing someone in person versus watching someone on film is different.
Yeah.
And I know that that's hard to understand. But watching them play against actual football players and the game film that he has from all the games he's won is a really good measuring stick to what he can accomplish. But he is coming off a serious injury. And we talk about it's the same style of injury that ended Bo Jackson's career.
It's the exact same injury.
I know medical advances have changed the game completely. But to not be able to see him move in person changes the entire dynamic of what he can do. His film is phenomenal. No one will doubt what he can accomplish as a quarterback in winning football games at the highest level. Everyone will agree that Alabama and the SEC is one of the most difficult conferences to play in college football. But he is coming off a serious injury, and no one is going to be able to watch him move in person. And I think that drastically changes what is going to happen. And like we just talked about, is there a team that is absolutely in love with what Tua does and will draft him no matter what, and it could change the face of their franchise? Absolutely. But I think that in my mind, there is more question marks surrounding what he can do physically right now because of that injury that is going to get him in the range of falling. I don't know if he's going to make it all the way to the 18th pick, to the Dolphins' second pick.
Do you think he gets past the Chargers at 6?
I certainly believe he is not the number 3 pick. I don't know if he's the number 6 pick.
Okay.
I think we're going to talk about it here in a second. I think he has to fall down. And again, some of this is going to benefit players who maybe won't be in the same spot. But a guy like Tua, who if he can work out in person, may have increased his draft stock. I think you have to kind of temper your enthusiasm and see what he can do. And because nobody has been able to see it in person, that changes your perspective on where he is as far as it comes to a first-round draft pick.
I think the other thing you have to factor in, too, is that basically 2020 is going to be a redshirt season for Tua. I don't think anybody that drafts him, whether it's Miami, whether it's the Chargers, whether it's somebody else, that drafts that decides they want to go for Tua, he's gonna sit on the bench in 2020. I think fans of whatever team gets him need to understand that. Now with Miami, if that's the case, you've got Fitzmagic down there to hold it over for a year and turn the reins over to. There you go. And in LA, the Chargers have Tyrod Taylor, who they say they've got all the confidence in the world in. They let Phillip Rivers walk.
They say that's their guy. Well, we both agreed that Phillip Rivers was probably not the solution going forward, and we know how franchises work. But to be sold on Tyrod Taylor, I don't think that San Diego / LA is their long-term plan, is to be sold on Tyrod Taylor. And nothing is Tyrod Taylor. I think he's a very efficient quarterback, but I don't think he's your franchise quarterback going forward. And we've talked about this in the past. We are no strangers here at Fumblegate of dogging guys who people think are franchise quarterbacks. Punch face number 1 and punch face number 2, who both, by the way, are unemployed or looking to be traded right now, are not franchise quarterbacks.
No, they're both unemployed. No
strangers of telling people that they are not franchise quarterbacks. Tyrod Taylor may be an effective stopgap, but he is not a franchise quarterback.
How high of warm fuzzies did you get when you heard that both Jameis Winston and Cam Newton were unemployed?
Oh, I loved it, and you tagged it on the. For those of you who don't follow us on social media, go watch the videos. The video of Jameis Winston's off-season workout.
Oh,
where he's working out on a high school grass field, and moving just the stuff they do.
Some slow motion crab walk stuff.
Oh, I need it. You hate to see it.
No, you don't. You don't hate to see it at all.
I love to see it, but for those of you out there who didn't know, it's interesting, and you know why we're not a fan of them, and me personally, they're not franchise quarterbacks. We know why they're not. But back to the original question, I love the fact that they're both on the market as far as when it comes to quarterbacks. I love it because neither of them is your franchise quarterback going forward.
Would you sign either one of them to be a backup if you were a general manager?
I think you have to. I think Cam Newton, and we've mentioned this in the past, I think Cam Newton has kind of quit. I think it's similar to a Andrew Luck situation where he just doesn't give a shit anymore, and that makes a difference. Yeah. And I think Jameis Winston cares, but he doesn't show it.
Winston's also, I think, only 26 years old. So you have time.
He has a window, but am I investing what he wants in a franchise quarterback? Absolutely not. What about Jameis Winston makes you want to invest in him as a franchise quarterback?
I think
he's an NFL record holder, but is the 30-30 club the record you want to employ?
I think one real quick. I know we're kind of getting away from the draft here for a moment. I think the one spot that makes a lot of sense for Jameis Winston, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
Sit behind Ben and learn. Sit behind Ben, learn that offense for a year because Ben doesn't have much time left. He has a majestic beard, but as far as playing goes, the amount of games in front of him are much shorter than the amount of games he's already played. So I think that would be a really good spot. They're similar body guys. Well, just the number of games he's played. They're he's not playing as many games going forward as he's already done. The similar style, similar bodied guys that they are, Ben's a little heavier, but Winston's not a shrimp. He's a big dude.
No, he's a well-built guy. I mean,
but I think
not walking out of the Piggly Wiggly with crab legs for free if you're not a well-built guy. You're not stealing crab legs if you're a skinny shrimp.
But that's a spot that makes a lot of sense. But you also have to assume he's willing to be a backup for a year, maybe even 2 years, and then move on. I as far as Newton goes, that's going to be tough.
Well, there's going to be suitors out there, and we're going to have to see what the draft does and where do guys fall and who's looking for a starter and who's still
Well, that's the
looking
problem.
for a quality backup.
That's the problem.
Is land.
I don't think Newton is going to want to be a backup.
No,
to me, I think he's going to be a guy he would rather retire than be a backup. And so I think the spot that makes a lot of sense on paper is the LA Chargers. However, it looks like the prevailing thought going into this draft is they're going to draft their quarterback for the future, in which case you're not going to carry Cam Newton, Tyrod Taylor, and potentially the 6th pick of the draft all on the roster at the same time, unless you decide you're going to draft and take a swing on Tua and basically redshirt him this year. But I still
are you bringing in Cam Newton and then picking quarterback at number 6? Like, Cam Newton is not going to take $1 million a year to be your quarterback and tutor a guy who's going to take his job. So are you willing to pay Cam Newton you probably have to pay him middle of the road quarterback money to be a tutor for a guy who's going to take over? And that's why this draft is really going to say a lot when it comes to a guy like Sean Hill and Teddy Bridgewater. Like, where are those guys going to fall when it comes to how this quarterback draft plays out? Because there's a lot of very good quarterbacks out there available, and guys who are starting quarterback quality. It's going to be interesting to see where these quarterbacks play out, because Cam Newton is a lot more valuable to a franchise who doesn't have a starter than he is to being a mentor
that's
to certain franchises.
Think about it, though. When you go through the league, how many teams don't have starters? There aren't that many. I mean,
but like quality starters. Like, are we talking about Chicago? Chicago has a starter, but is he a quality starter?
But they just drafted him 3 years ago. They're not giving up on it. Plus, they just traded for Nick Foles.
Starter. Like, Jameis Winston's only 26, but is he a quality starter? No. Like, you lost your job to a 43-year-old Tom Brady. Like, Tom Brady is still really good, but is he an elite quarterback? Absolutely not. Like, there is definitely opportunities out there for guys like Cam Newton to get a starting job position, and that's why it's going to really come down to how does this draft play out, because if teams don't – like, if for some reason the Chargers do not draft a quarterback at 6, it changes their entire perspective, because Cam Newton is more valuable than the number 38 pick than he is the number 6 pick. The number 6 pick is your starter. The number 38 pick can be your backup. Like, that's why this draft is going to make so much of a difference, because, again, there's a lot of good free agent quarterbacks out there that it's going to be interesting to see where these teams pick their quarterbacks, because how do the free agents or tradable quarterbacks play out in the next 24 to 48 hours is really going to be telling based on who is picking where.
There you go. So let's get into it now, and let's give you our mock top 10. Again, this will be without trades. I know Adam really thinks there will be a trade happening at number 3, and you'll go into that here in just a moment. But for now, we'll keep the draft in order. That would be a hypothetical scenario in which you're going under. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to alternate picks for the top 10. Now, Joe Burrow's the number 1 pick, so we're not even going to go into that. We did at the top of the show. So
we're starting with the number 2 pick.
We'll start at the number 2 pick, and we'll decide who makes the number 2 pick. We have a highly scientific way to do it. Adam's got like a magnet or something. He's going to flip, and we'll see which side it lands on. I don't even know what it looks like. What's it look like?
It's black on one side.
Okay.
Silver on the other.
Oh, it's a bottle cap. It wasn't even a magnet. It was a bottle cap. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and say that Fumblegate Fatty is an alcoholic and he likes to drink, so he's going to flip a bottle cap. And Mr. Griefer is going to pick his choice.
Silver.
Gray or black, or silver or black. And we will do our top 10 from there. By the way, we are going to be completely accurate. No matter how this works out, we're going to be completely accurate on who is picked in the top 10.
Yeah.
As we told you since January, we knew that Joe Burrow would be the number 1 pick. Completely accurate here at Fumblegate. So you're going to get your 2 through 10 no matter who picks at number 2. But we're going to give you an idea of what teams are looking for and what they're going to pick based on this bottle cap flip here. Jason is going silver, which is the, I guess, the tails portion of the bottle cap flip. Go ahead and give it a run. It is silver, so we're going to go ahead and let Jason Griefer pick at number 2. Now, this is the easy one. We're going to let Jason Griefer pick for Washington. And on the clock, the Washington racist
football team.
Logo,
the Washington football team.
The Washington football team. They are picking at number 2, Mr.
Chase Young, Ohio State. Now, obviously, you could consider an offensive tackle here, considering that there looks like maybe a deal's coming into place to move Trent Williams on. The Cleveland talk is ramped up again with that. But when you have such a
that rumor's always been out there. The Trent Williams rumor has been out there for I feel like it's been 3 years now.
He also posted something within the last 24 hours, something on Snapchat that it was like a fingers crossed emoji followed by a winky face emoji, which a lot of people think maybe means the deal's place. I know it doesn't mean, but in either case, he's basically decided I'm not playing for Washington anymore. So offensive tackle would make sense in this scenario to protect Dwayne Haskins' blind side, even if Ron Rivera doesn't think Dwayne Haskins is the future. I wouldn't be totally shocked if they consider a quarterback at number 2, but you can't pass on Chase Young. He is the best defensive line prospect to come out of Ohio State in some time, and that includes the Bosa brothers. I believe he is going to be better in the NFL than both the Bosa brothers, and that's not a knock on them. That's how good I think Chase Young is. I think this is a slam dunk pick, and Washington with the second pick will select Chase Young, defensive end, Ohio State. Now,
and just real quick, I agree. I think we've talked about this in the past. Chase Young at the number 1 pick. Again, if the Bengals are not picking number 1, Chase Young is the best prospect, I think, in this draft. Like you mentioned, the Bosa brothers notwithstanding, Chase Young is the best prospect coming out of Ohio State in recent memory.
I think if it wasn't so obvious that the Bengals were looking to move on from Andy Dalton, if they were sold on Andy Dalton for the long term, Chase Young would be a Cincinnati Bengal.
Yeah, if you told me that the Bengals were sticking with Andy Dalton and they were picking Chase Young, as a casual football fan, I would love it. But we know the Bengals are going in quarterback direction. Obviously, the news has been leaked that Joe Burrow is going number 1.
Well, we leaked that months ago because that's what we do.
Yeah, first leaked by us at Fumblegate back in January. But the Bengals themselves have confirmed what we have all along known. Chase Young at number 2 completely makes sense. Again, if the Bengals were not picking quarterback at number 1, Chase Young at number 1 is a phenomenal pick.
Yeah.
Don't fault you at all, which is why I joked, before we made the coin flip. The number 2 pick is the easy part. From here, 3 through 10 is what becomes a little bit more difficult.
So now at 3, the Detroit Lions are on the clock, and we're going to stick with the traditional draft order, as we said, but you have a scenario in mind where the Lions do indeed move back from number 3.
I do, and so assuming because of the scenario we're playing, I have the Lions staying at number 3 with Jeff Okudah, DB from Ohio State. We're going 2 and 3 from the Ohio State, which, by the way, is the dumbest thing I've ever done. But Ohio State going number 2 and number 3. Jeff Okudah, they need a DB there in Detroit. Again, I think they're sticking with Matt Stafford. Now, there are some pundits who think that the Lions could take a quarterback here at number 3, and I agree, and that's why I have proposed the fantasy trade.
Okay.
I think this is a spot where we mentioned in the past where Miami could move up to number 3. And here's why I think this makes sense. The Lions can play the game that we are taking a quarterback at number 3 because all reports, and whether you're from the Detroit area or not, is that the Lions are not sold on Matt Stafford. So it is easy to play the game that they want a quarterback at number 3.
Yeah.
This is why I think we see the first trade in the draft. Miami, who is flush with first-round draft picks, comes up to number 3 to take a quarterback because the Lions can play that they are going to take one. I think Okudah is their pick, whether they stay at 3 or go to 5. I think they get Okudah no matter what. Mm-hmm. But I see the Miami and the Dolphins making the trade to get up to number 3. But as it stands in the Fumblegate fantasy draft, I am picking Jeff Okudah at number 3 with the Detroit Lions.
So you said Miami would trade it. You think Miami's going to trade to 3, but you didn't tell us who they would take. You said it would be a quarterback, but you didn't say
trades. Okay. Miami, if they come up to number 3, I am actually going with Herbert because I feel like we just mentioned, most pundits would say that Tua is your number 2 quarterback in this draft. I just think that there's too much of a question mark. And like you said, the red shirt possibility of Tua, I don't think you can take Tua at number 3. I think you have to go with Herbert at number 3. And I think, in my opinion, Miami comes up to number 3 and takes Herbert out of Oregon.
Okay, so there you go. Under the proposed scenario, Adam would have Miami move up to 3 to take Justin Herbert, not Tua Tagovailoa, but for the purposes of our draft. And I think you're right. We have Jeff Okudah going number 3 to the Lions. I think if the Lions move back to number 5, they'd get Jeff Okudah anyway. And I say that because now the New York Giants are on the clock, and then if the scenario plays out and everything goes according to plan, the Giants sprint to the Zoom machine and hold up the index card, or however they're going to send it off to Roger Goodell in his basement and tell Roger Goodell that the Giants are drafting Tristan Wirfs, the tackle from Iowa. A lot of people are looking at the spot Isaiah Simmons, the linebacker, defensive end, safety from Clemson, who can do everything, play everywhere. But as we talked about in our video about Rob Gronkowski joining Tampa Bay, which you can watch here on our Fumblegate YouTube channel, you need somebody now to protect the blind side of Daniel Jones. You just drafted him last year. You've got Saquon Barkley back there. Now you got to start sort of solidifying that offensive line. And I think he is the number 1 guy on the offensive line in this draft. As we talked about, this offensive line draft, especially a tackle, is loaded with talent at the top. But I think for my money, Tristan Wirfs is the guy that comes off the board at number 4 here, and he's a New York Giant and probably a New York Giant for the next 10 years, protecting Daniel Jones's blind side. So now let's go to number 5. Under Adam's proposed scenario, this would be the Detroit Lions who would get Jeff Okudah, but we have him going straight by the board, number 3. So now the Dolphins are on the clock now at number 5. If this happens, do you still think they pull the trigger on Justin Herbert?
I still think they'd pull the trigger on Justin Herbert. If the trade doesn't happen, the Dolphins have to go quarterback here. I think because of the question marks surrounding Tua Tagovailoa, I think you have to go Justin Herbert here. Again, I think the trade happens. I think the teams end up with the same players they wanted anyway. By the way, a great pick with the Giants with Tristan Wirfs. I think he is the best offensive lineman available in this draft. Mm-hmm. But again, I think given the question marks surrounding where Tua is prior to the season, he may have been the number 1 quarterback in this draft. Obviously, Joe Burrow's historic season, you cannot discount that.
Going into the year, Tua was unquestionably the number 1 prospect. But again, nobody heard of Joe Burrow, or Joe Burrow didn't blow up and burst onto the scene. And of course, Tua got hurt.
Yeah, certainly Joe Burrow went from a mid-round prospect to a number 1 prospect, no question. Again, I think the question mark surrounding Tua leaves Herbert here in the open for Miami. Assuming that they don't trade, which I think they will, I think this is obviously the spot where the Dolphins take Herbert.
Okay, so now the LA Chargers on the clock at number 6, and they have options here at number 6. It depends on how sold they are on Tyrod Taylor. Anthony Lynn's been heaping his praises all throughout the offseason, even before they officially parted ways with Phillip Rivers. It fell along, he's their guy. They really like him. They like what he can do, so on and so forth. So do they stick with that and let him be the guy, let him have a chance to prove to be the guy, or do they go in another direction here? Conventional wisdom here, I really don't want to do this, but I think they're going to draft. I think they're going to go with Tua at number 6. I think it just makes too much sense not to do it. I think for me going forward for them, as far as development goes, I would love to see them with Isaiah Simmons, because you've got, Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram up on your front to lead your defensive line, get somebody behind them that can go everywhere. And also the fact that you've got a scenario where Bosa and Ingram are free agents in 2021. So you need to think about that long term as well. But I think in this scenario, Tua's the guy. Looking ahead to next year's draft, the only guy that everybody's talking about is Trevor Lawrence, obviously. But nobody has aspirations to be the number one pick outside of Miami this year when they were tanking for Tua the entire time. But I think it makes too much sense here not to take Tua. Tyrod Taylor, as we talked about, not a franchise guy. He'll get a chance to prove it this year. I don't think it mattered who the pick was here at 6. If it was Tua or if it was Justin Herbert, I think it would still lean Tyrod Taylor, and that other guy coming in would take the job away from him. But now with this, you let Tua redshirt and tell Tyrod Taylor, you're our guy going forward. Now, and if Tyrod Taylor has a really nice season, then he's trade bait next year for somebody that needs a quarterback. But I think Tua just makes way too much sense here at number 6 for the LA Chargers. Let's go to number 7 and the former employer of Cam Newton. Good for you. The Carolina Panthers now on the clock. Matt Rule in his first year leaving Baylor. He's got Teddy Bridgewater as his guy. They gave him $63 million for 3 years. So the quarterback is not going to be on the table for them this year. They need a lot of help in other areas here. Where are you looking for Carolina at number 7?
So I think you got to go defense, and we've talked about this plenty of times here on Fumblegate. The defense really makes or breaks your franchise in the long run. Mm-hmm. And at the D line, you can really get a very, very big value pick here. I'm going Derek Brown, D lineman from Auburn. Yeah. He is a plug-and-play starter in the NFL. He's the number 1 defensive lineman, particularly interior defensive lineman in this draft. I don't know how you let him go at this point. You have your franchise quarterback. You got plenty of decent skill position players around him. I think you cannot pass a talent like Derek Brown at this pick. Yeah. It has to be the pick going forward. The Panthers obviously playing catch up to the Saints. Now playing catch up to the Buccaneers. You have to get after the quarterback in this division. Both of those other teams are playing with quarterbacks who are aging, who are going to end up with young quarterbacks in the future. Mm-hmm. You're playing the long game here. You got to get after the quarterback. Derek Brown is the pick here, no question.
Yeah, I think if Brown's available at number 7 at this spot, if it was either he or Isaiah Simmons, either one, if only one's available in a normal scenario, you're sprinting to the podium.
Obviously the loss of Luke Kuechly at the middle linebacker makes a big difference. Yeah, like you mentioned, I agree. I think that Simmons is not getting picked before this pick, mm-hmm. But we've seen in the past that middle linebackers had a shorter shelf life than dominant interior defensive linemen. I think that's the move here. Again, you have to put pressure. Putting pressure with your front 4 and not having to bring a linebacker makes a big difference in the NFL. Yeah. I think that's kind of the trend that the NFL is moving towards. You look at the emphasis that's being placed on 3 techniques and defensive ends. Yeah. You can get to the quarterback. I think that's why Derek Brown makes a lot of sense here. Again, Isaiah Simmons, phenomenal talent, and he can play a lot of different spots on an NFL football field. Yeah. But Derek Brown has the ability to get to the quarterback. And again, with 2 quarterbacks who are over the age of 42 going forward, and teams that everyone in this division is going to have to reset their quarterback within the next 3 years. If you have a 3 technique who can get to the quarterback, that's going to pay dividends in the long run. And that's why I think Derek Brown has to be the pick here. Even though Isaiah Simmons, we both agree, will still be on the board here, mm-hmm. I think Derek Brown has to be the pick.
Let's move on now to the Arizona Cardinals at number 8. Obviously, I think I think for me last year it was obvious they outperformed expectations. With making the move for Kyler Murray, Quaffborough as your head coach, and you don't know what you're going to get there. And I think they surprised some people. Finishing 5-10-1, but a lot of people thought they were going to be right up there contending for the number 1 pick again this year, and they wound up being the 8th pick instead. Kyler Murray's been campaigning for CeeDee Lamb, his buddy from Oklahoma, to join him in Arizona. In theory, yes, but in practicality, no. I think the DeAndre Hopkins trade has taken that off the board. at this point because
certainly a great trade for them. And we've talked about in our chat. We have a buddy who lives down in Houston, and the joke about Houston and them trading away all their assets for
Billy O'Blunder.
And what Billy Blunder is doing down there.
Yeah.
I think the DeAndre Hopkins trade essentially changes this pick. And then, like you just mentioned, I think that CeeDee Lamb was certainly in play, but DeAndre Hopkins really does change this pick.
Yeah, and because you got Hopkins, you got Christian Kirk, you still have Larry Fitzgerald, who just seemingly doesn't age and apparently will never retire. But
right. He might play until he's 55.
Yeah. So you've got options here. Obviously, anyone in the top 10's got options here. But, you could look at maybe Javon Kinlaw, the defensive lineman from South Carolina. He's in play right here. I think if Isaiah Simmons is available at 8, he's got to be in play here as well. But for me, I'm going to go Jedrick Wills, offensive lineman from Alabama here. And the biggest thing was, is agile and as athletic as Kyler Murray is, he got hit a lot a year ago, and he is not a big dude. He is a very small frame guy. Needs somebody on the outside that can protect him. I like Wills's athleticism to move around in the pocket just a bit more than Mekhi Becton in this scenario, and I think you're going to need that given that, with Kyler Murray, he's the type of guy where he can quickly turn a play into street ball, like Lamar Jackson and those other type of very, very athletic quarterbacks that when things break down, they can go make things happen. You got to have a guy on the outside that can move and adjust to that. And I think Wills is a guy that he played right tackle at Alabama. You can move him to left tackle, but probably has to improve his footwork a little bit to solidify his spot at left tackle. But even at that, you could start him at the right side, move him to left side. You can speak to that for sure. But I think offensive line here is the pick. Get Murray some help, yes, but you're protecting him, not giving him another weapon to throw to in CeeDee Lamb.
Well, like you mentioned, he can make plays with his feet, but they don't want him to. They want him to be able to sit in the pocket and have a sense of familiarity or comfortability in that pocket.
Sure.
And I think I agree. I think I had Jedrick Wills at this pick too. I think you have to protect your franchise quarterback. Obviously, going number 1 last year, I think you have to give him some comfortability in the pocket, and I think that's a great pick there. I got the Jaguars here at number 9.
Let me set this up. To me, this is a Jaguars team that's in tank mode. You look at the moves they've made, trading away Jalen Ramsey, trading away A.J. Bouye. They're letting Calais Campbell go. Marcel Darius is gone. Yannick Ngakoue has told everybody, even though he's been franchised, he will not play another down here. They wasted, $28 million on Nick Foles and shipped him off to Chicago. So now it's the Gardner Minshew show.
Time out. We got to give a pause so I can throw this in. Where's Nick Foles going?
Chicago.
Big Dick Nick heading to Chi-Town. Just want to throw that in.
Thank you very much. And there's also I was waiting for it. There's also
I just want to get the Big Dick Nick in there. That's
apparently also now Jacksonville's talking about trading Leonard Fournette too. And they cut Marquise Lee, one of their more reliable receivers the last few years. To me, they're in full tank mode for next year to see if maybe they can get Trevor Lawrence from Clemson. And so they signed, or they tried to sign Darqueze Dennard, and I don't know if that deal ever got done. It supposedly was agreed to, then it fell apart, so on and so forth. It's a mess in Jacksonville. That's what it is more than anything else. So with that said, give Jacksonville some help with the 9th pick.
You know what? I agree with you. I think we talked about this before. I think Jacksonville is headed into tank mode. I think they're building up to get Trevor Lawrence next year. And for that reason, I think they're going for a weapon for Trevor Lawrence. I don't hate Gardner Minshew, and I love the social media presence, and I love what he does. I think he can be an effective quarterback. I think he's a long-term backup at minimum in the NFL. He just has the swagger that follows NFL quarterbacks. But in the long term, he's not your franchise quarterback. I think, like you mentioned, Trevor Lawrence is the franchise quarterback going forward. For that reason, we're putting a weapon around him. I got CeeDee Lamb here as the pick. I just trying to put somebody who can stretch the field vertically. Sure-handed receiver who is going to make that offense better. Again, it's a long-term pick here.
Yeah.
They could go offensive line here. They could go defense here.
They need defensive help big time.
There's a Isaiah Simmons is a good pick here.
Yeah.
Again, if you're looking at the number one pick next year, who at this time, and again we just talked about it, Tua was the number one pick at this time last year.
Mm-hmm.
If Trevor Lawrence is the number one pick next year, and that's what the Jacksonville Jaguars are working towards, I think you got to put weapons on the table. I think CeeDee Lamb is the pick here at number 9.
Okay, so receiver comes off the board, and CeeDee Lamb from Oklahoma at 9. Now to the 10th pick, and who's picking at 10, Adam?
The Browns. Cleveland.
Thank you very much. So they got new uniforms. So
they did,
that's cool.
And you mentioned it earlier. They look good.
They look good.
Did no joke. They went out and gave the people something to be excited about. The Cleveland Browns went out, made some nice uniforms. It's a throwback of sorts. They went out and gave you something new to look at, which here in Cincinnati we don't do. The Browns went out and gave you something new to look at. Picking here at number 10, what do you get? They got, assuming we have the franchise quarterback, they've gone defense the last couple of years. They don't have a bad group of skill players around. What are we doing here at number 10?
Got to protect your quarterback, like anything,
Really?
like anybody else. They made a really nice signing Jack Conklin away from Tennessee, so you have your right tackle secured. Now it's time to move to the left side and protect Baker Mayfield's blind side. Get Mekhi Becton, offensive tackle from Louisville.
If he's here at number 10, you cannot pass on him at number 10.
He is a mammoth human being. 6'7", 365 pounds. Dude can move. He's an agile dude at that size. But I think right now that is the most glaring need. I think if Isaiah Simmons is here at this spot, there is going to be some real temptation there from Cleveland.
There is certainly a discussion in the war room. If Isaiah Simmons is here at 10, if you have what appears to be a franchise middle linebacker, outside linebacker, however you want to call it, a difference maker in the middle of your defense.
Yeah.
Versus like you said, a mammoth of a human being, a 370-pound, 6'7" offensive lineman who's going to protect who we assume is going to be their franchise quarterback going forward. It's going to be a very, very tough decision in the war room in Cleveland. If they're both on the table, this, I think, is the toughest decision here early in the draft. Because if both of them are on the table, there's going to be people moving up to this spot asking who's available to get Isaiah Simmons or Mekhi Becton. Because I think Mekhi Becton may be the best offensive player in this offensive lineman in this draft. Mm-hmm. Isaiah Simmons is certainly the best second-level defender in this draft. And if you're sitting here at 10 and they're both on the table, you are going to have people running to your phones offering you a bevy of picks to get this pick.
I think also, too, under this scenario here, you get to the Jets at number 11, and this is all they're going to do with their pick. They're just going to write Isaiah Simmons. Isaiah Simmons, please.
Yeah, take Becton. We will sprint to the podium with Isaiah.
Right. Well, since they can't sprint to the podium, I think that's the biggest thing. Just hold up to your webcam.
They'll sprint to their Zoom meeting, like we here at Fumblegate are using.
Mute your audio. Just hold up a card right there. It says Isaiah Simmons, please, and you go from there because the Jets need help on the defensive side, especially get somebody to get after the quarterback. All right, so now that's our top 10. Now let's recap here. As we told you months ago was going to happen, the Cincinnati Bengals will select Joe Burrow with the number 1 pick. We had it before everybody else. #Inside Scoop. We're not wrong. Second pick, Washington is going with Chase Young, the best overall prospect in this draft. And so he'll help along the defensive line. Adam has Jeff Okudah going to the Lions at number 3 in our order. Under his own scenario, he actually has the Lions trading back to number 5 to get Jeff Okudah. But under our circumstances, he's at number 3. The Giants at number 4 shore up their offensive line with Tristan Wirfs. Protect the blind side of Daniel Jones, get Saquon Barkley some protection there. And at number 5, Adam has the Dolphins taking Justin Herbert, not Tua Tagovailoa. And you have to imagine with that pick, though, that Justin Herbert's a starter day one in Miami, is he not?
Has to be. And whether it's two, if the Dolphins select a quarterback, whether it's 3 or 5, and we talked about this, whether it's 3 or 5, that is your starter from day one.
Yeah.
And I don't see any other scenario where that's not your day one starter. That's why I think, like we mentioned, I think the Lions can play the game a little bit, force the Dolphins to give them a pick to move up and select the quarterback they choose. I think it's Justin Herbert, just because Tua does not have the luxury of being able to work out in person for teams. And I think the Lions still end up with Okudah no matter whether they pick at 3 or 5.
Okay, so that's 1 through 5. Recap for us 6 through 10.
So I have the Chargers, who need a franchise quarterback. We've already talked about. We want to pretend like they have one. They don't. I think Tua is the quarterback at number 6. I think they have to go out and get a franchise quarterback. Mm-hmm. I got the Panthers getting Derek Brown, the number 1 defensive lineman prospect in this draft.
Defensive tackle.
With defensive tackle. Chase Young may or may not put his hand in the dirt, and you know this as a Kentucky fan. You may or may not have Chase Young with his hand in the dirt. He works in space. He can stand up. He can play a 3-4 outside linebacker.
We all know that Chase Young wears Josh Allen pajamas when he goes to bed.
Absolutely, and you being a UK fan, we know Josh Allen can put his hand in the dirt. Chase Young can put his hand in the dirt.
And I'm a true fan because I graduated from the school.
Absolutely,
that's an inside joke.
No homers around here. We got the true UK alum, Jason Griefer.
That's right. That's right.
We
Number 8.
Both have Jedrick Wills heading to Arizona. I got CeeDee Lamb here at number 9 going to the Jaguars because, again, I think they're playing the long game. I don't think that Gardner Minshew is their long-term quarterback. I think he could be. He's playing from behind. He's an undersized guy who's working off of not being the franchise guy to begin with. I think they're playing the long game, looking for the tank for the kid.
Tank for Trevor. Tank for Sunshine.
Tank for Trevor. There you go.
If it were me, real quick, if under the scenario with Jacksonville, and I understand the pick of Lamb, get somebody outside, especially after they sent Marquise Lee packing. If it were me in that scenario, making this 9th pick, and again, you did, but if it were me, I'd be running to the podium to get Isaiah Simmons. I get your pick of CeeDee Lamb. I really do.
Again, if Isaiah Simmons falls past 6, there is going to be a lot of suitors looking for him. Whether you're going to pick him as the team with your actual pick or not, there's going to be a lot of suitors looking for Isaiah Simmons. Mm-hmm. And anywhere 6 through 11, people are going to be looking to trade to get him. There you go. The scenario of leaving him out because we are not allowed trades, I think that CeeDee Lamb has to be the pick there, just because if you're tanking for Trevor, you have to have weapons for him when he comes in.
Yeah.
It has to be the pick. And again, Mekhi Becton, I think, save Wirfs, who is a man-child, they both are. I think Becton may be the best offensive lineman in this draft in the long run, just because the guy is a unit. Like 6'7", 370. I'm a big dude, and I'm a chubby buddy. That dude is a unit when it comes to being over 6'7" and over 370 pounds. The dude looks good. And again, he could be the best offensive lineman in this draft easily. I think the Browns need him. He's a plug and play, obviously, from day one.
Yeah.
But you're going to have the option to kind of place him where you want him, whether it's left tackle, right guard, whether you want to be the pulling guy. He's just too big of a body to pass up at number 10.
Well, you said that your former O-line coach, Paul Alexander, who was in the NFL as a line coach for more than a quarter century, thought that he was the best offensive tackle prospect in this draft, was in love with him. What did he say about Becton that made him gush?
The way he moves for his size, and he made the brief comparison to a guy like Andrew Whitworth because his arm length, he has the ability to keep defenders off of him. and his feet are like surprisingly good. I guess that's not the right adjective, but they're
for such a huge dude.
Yes, for as big as he is deceivingly quick with his feet. He has the ability to get and close space on defenders. And again, you're working with a unit who's 6'7", 370. Like, if you can move like we think you can move, you hate to do the American Conference comparison, but if you can move that well at that size, that makes a difference. And again, I think Wirfs is a phenomenal player. I think Wills is a phenomenal player, but it's hard to detract from a guy who's over 6'7"-ish, 6'7" and a quarter, 6'7" and a half, and over 370 pounds. Like, if you can move, that dude is a dude for years to come. And we talked about it. The Browns need offensive line help. They have to protect a franchise quarterback. Mm-hmm. They have running backs back there that can get yards for you. We'll see what happens with Odell Beckham. What can they do on the outside? But, you put a guy like – if that guy's there at 10 and Isaiah Simmons is still on the board, it's hard to pass up an offensive lineman who's that big and can move that well at number 10. And again, Isaiah Simmons, if he makes it past 6, there's going to be suitors. There's going to be people trying to get up there. But again, you cannot detract from somebody who's 6'7", 370. You just can't. You can't.
I think,
you can't train size like that. You can't.
How big are his hands?
Probably bigger than mine. Tiny hands like mine. I know. Me and we're kind of one and the same. We both have tiny hands. Now, he's going to be the number 1 pick versus the number 153. But, small hands doesn't matter. But I'm sure his are bigger than mine.
I think I had to do it. I think
very well played, sir.
I think the thing, too, with whomever they get, assuming they go offensive tackle at number 10, with that addition and assuming that they'll probably put this person at left tackle, whomever it is, because you've got your right tackle now, Jack Conklin. It becomes one of the more complete offenses in the NFL because you've got bookends on the offensive line to protect Mayfield. You talked about the tailbacks that they have there, and Chubb and Kareem Hunt's going to be back. You've got Jarvis Landry, OBJ, David Njoku, really, really nice tight end. It becomes very complete. Isaiah Simmons is going to be awfully tempting right there, and it would not shock me also too, and it would be very appropriate, and it wouldn't be that big of a move up also to see Isaiah Simmons become a Las Vegas Raider and see the Raiders go up from, and they're only picking at 12, but go up to say, number 7. Maybe Carolina decides, you know what, let's move back, let's acquire more assets. And what has basically become a rebuild outside of Christian McCaffrey. This is a rebuild in Carolina. Let's move back. Let's acquire some more assets because there's going to be, Carolina needs a receiver. There's going to be several of those available, including the 2 from Alabama, Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs III. There's other help available, defensive line, talking about Javon Kinlaw, other options out there too. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Raiders give up next year's 1 to go up from 12 to 7. To get Isaiah Simmons, and basically he becomes your replacement for Khalil Mack because they haven't found a replacement for Khalil Mack. Not an easy guy to replace.
That trade they made.
Not an easy guy to replace in Khalil Mack, but he becomes the next big defensive star in now Las Vegas. So I think that could be a interesting thing too as well.
I think even if the draft plays out the way we thought, and we weren't supposed to do trades and so on. Seeing Miami trade up to number 3, there's a lot of teams that could trade up to number 3 because given the quarterback and like we said with the system and the limited availability that people have to seeing people in person, if you have someone you're sold on as a quarterback, even number 3 is open because we would assume that the Lions are sticking with Matt Stafford. If you want your quarterback at number 3, there's going to be a lot of movement that can happen. And Miami has the chips. Miami certainly has the chips to move up to any spot they want to and move back in any spot they want to. Miami has the chips. But there's a lot of really good football players who are in the mold of teams who are not picking in the top 10 who may move in that spot. And like my mock draft does not have Isaiah Simmons in the top 10. Is he a top 10 talent? Absolutely. If you need a second-level defender talent, Isaiah Simmons is a top 3 pick. But unfortunately for him, the top 10 picks, as they sit, don't need him. So if there's a team that wants to come up and give him, this top 10 can change very, very easily. Don't be surprised if you're watching the draft tomorrow night. Do not be surprised if there is a minimum of 2 trades within the top 10. And if there's 3, it would not shock me. The only team I know who is not trading the number 1 pick is the Cincinnati Bengals. I wouldn't be surprised if the Washington team is not interested in shopping the number 2 pick, because everybody knows Joe Burrow is going number 1. And Chase Young is the number 1 prospect in this draft. But if you want a quarterback, I'm calling Washington and asking what you want for number 2. Because Washington can fall back to number 3, probably number 6, and still get Chase Young. They really could. There's a lot of trades that can happen here.
Wait, did you just say Washington could trade back to 6 and still get Chase Young?
In theory, everybody in front of absolutely.
Anybody that trades up to 2 is taking Chase Young.
Absolutely. But I'm saying if you want a quarterback, you can go up and get him, and Chase Young could fall as low as 6. I don't think it's going to happen, and I don't think that anybody's doing that. But if we look at our mock drafts and what we just did, Chase Young could easily fall to number 6 because the teams that were potentially trade up would not be looking for a defensive end. There's a lot of stuff that could happen. Yeah. And I think the top 2 are guaranteed. I think that obviously we know Joe Burrow's number 1. I think that Chase Young is number 2, and there's no question about it. I don't think anybody's coming in there. But 3 through 10, if there are 3 trades in 3 through 10, it would not shock me at all.
Yeah, 3 through 10, I think it's going to be wide open for business because there's outside of those first 2 guys, there's Burrow and Young. There's not really anybody that jumps off as like, oh my God, gotta have him.
Well, and there's so much. What do you need? That's what makes it so crazy.
Yeah,
there are superior talented athletes, but it's what do you need and what are you willing to come get them?
Sure.
Because that's why 3 through 10 is so wide open, because there's so many teams who could come up to any of those spots. And again, in my mock draft, Isaiah Simmons is sitting there at 11. And if you need a middle linebacker and you're not picking in the top 10, I am banging the table to put my draft picks out there to get up to inside the top 10 to pick Isaiah Simmons. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like, there's no question about it. That's like, there's just so many things that could happen in this top 10. Again, given all of the – there you go. Given all of the question marks surrounding the way this draft is going to happen and how much limited exposure that these picks have with teams, there is so many options for teams that are down there in the draft in the mid-teens, early 20s to move up and get franchise players in the top 10. It would not surprise me to see 3 trades within the top 10 this year.
Wouldn't shock me at all either. It should be a very, very exciting draft. It's a very different time that we're in, so the draft's going to be under very unique circumstances. Roger Goodell will be broadcasting it from his basement. They're going to pipe in boos and give people a chance to boo. It's for charity. So
I like the boos for charity, but like Roger Goodell wouldn't get booed for every time he walked to the podium otherwise.
See, when I first heard they were still going to find a way to pipe in the boos before it was announced they were doing it for charity, I was laughing and shaking my head saying, of course. Even in an era where social distancing, he still has to feed his ego and be booed. But since it's being, they're going to do it in a way to where it becomes a charitable contribution, fine. Even from me, Roger Goodell will get a pass on this one, even though mostly for his part, it's still feeding his ego.
Yeah.
So,
but the money's going to charity, so we'll allow it.
There you go.
We both are not giant fans of Roger Goodell.
Well said. That's going to wrap up our preview of the 2020 NFL Draft. We certainly hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to recap maybe the first round or the first 3 rounds, whatever the case may be. Hopefully, our schedules will align and your schedule will align with us, that we can reconvene and do this again very, very quickly here in the future. Adam, where can folks find you on the social media and tweet things at you when it's proven that all of our picks are correct?
At Fumblegate Fatty. You can follow me on social media. I've been trying to keep a better eye on it. I've been doing a lot of Chippewas retweeting lately, but you know what? Follow us on the social media. Follow at Fumblegate. Follow Jason at
Jason Griefer. It's my name. It's at the bottom of the screen. There you go. Just do that all together, and you'll find me on there. And we'll be sending out some tweets during the draft as well. And like I said, we'll bring a recap to you at some point. But nevertheless, thank you so much for tuning in. Go back and check out some of our old episodes here on our YouTube channel as well, and see how accurate we were with those picks from the last couple of years that we've been doing this project, and basically get you prepared for this draft. And you can come back and comment here, and you can say, oh my God, you guys are geniuses. Well, I'm just going to stay tuned to you. I don't need to watch television football analysts, guys. I can come here to YouTube and get all the genius I need.
Yeah. Who needs all those guys to get paid $1 million a year? Like, who's been calling the number 1 pick since January? Like, we are 3.5 months into calling the number 1 pick. And just today, the Bengals announced that we at Fumblegate have been correct since 9.5 weeks ago. What do we have? 10.5 weeks? Months ago. Like, just now, they're announcing that we're correct. Like, why do you need to follow anybody else? Like, you don't need to follow anybody else. We've told you since back from before the national championship. Joe Burrow, number 1 pick. Today, the Bengals announced that we were correct. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know.
You ain't wrong, folks. We'll see you next time here on Fumblegate on YouTube.